Are the Senators the new drought Sabres? There's some good comparison to talk about tonight's opponent, Sabres and Senators, including a awesome return to the lineup coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is presented by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Sabres and Senators, KeyBank Center, 7 o'clock on Wednesday night. It is the Sabres' return from the West. They are 8 points back of a playoff spot with 10 games to go. If they won every single one of their games, it would put them pretty much right in line with the current projected playoff pace. So if they won out, they still would have maybe around a 50-50 shot to make the postseason. It ain't going to happen. This situation was furthered along on Tuesday night when the worst case scenario happened. And good thing the Sabres weren't actually in the race, or else we might have been more frustrated about it. The Red Wings and the Capitals played each other in a huge game between those two clubs to get that final playoff spot. Washington wins in overtime. So 3-point night between the two teams, and Washington in the driver's seat for that 8 spot, which is incredible. And it's so deflating because of how old that team is. It looked like they were done, and it was time to jump over top of those older teams. The Sabres have done that to the Penguins, at least match the Penguins, but they cannot get over the hump this year, at least when it comes to Washington. So we'll get to a lot of stuff today. The fan relationship between the team and why I think this is a big homestand, and it has nothing to do with the playoff race at all. Also, comparisons from the Sabres and Senators. We did a little bit about this on yesterday's show. I had a texter that texted an amazing comparison between the Sabres and the Senators, and I thought that our texter did a far better job comparing the Sabres of the drought to the current Senators than Bruce Garriock did at the Ottawa Sun. So I'll get you that text coming up in a little bit. If you want to shoot us a text or want to get updates like that Jack Quinn's playing tonight, we shot that around to everybody recently, especially stuff during the games as well. Be sure to check it out. Join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres if you are not already a member. So a lot to get to on today's show. Let's hear with the Locked On Sabres podcast, Sneaky Joe DiBiase. Let's start with the lineup and the big news of the lineup. We teased it a little bit last show that it looks like Jack Quinn might return this week. He was playing on a regular line at practice on Tuesday with Dylan Cozens and JJ Peterka, and sure enough, Don Granato, after the morning skate on Wednesday, says that he expects Quinn to play tonight. So I was off by one game on my prediction. We're going to get Quinn in the lineup against the Senators. Another really cool reason to watch. Quinn, who played his junior hockey in Ottawa, getting a crack at the lineup. And I had that stat of the day for you yesterday, that points per 60 minutes of ice time on the season. Quinn is number 1 on the Sabres, and he's number 1 by a lot in a limited sample. But again, I think it's almost more impressive for what he did because yeah, he only did it in 17 games. He was coming off a pretty major Achilles injury that had knocked him out for so long. So to me, it was even more impressive that Quinn put up the production he did in that 17-game stretch. So Quinn in the lineup. He'll go on a line with Peterka and Cozens. Those three, I mean, the Legion of Zoom, as we've called them, they might really be together forever. As long as those three guys are here, I wonder if they'll always come back to it. There are some lines that always stick together like that. You know, I don't know that that's happened with the Sabres. Like, what's the longest a line has been held together with the Sabres during the playoff drought? You know, you had Eichel with Reinhart and Skinner, maybe might be the line that's played the most together. Although there was a stretch where Pominville was in there for Reinhart for a while. Before that, I mean, there's really nothing in those tank years, right? There was an Ennis, Molson, and Girgensons line that stayed together for what seemed like 2 straight years. But I don't really think you've had longevity with any certain line. You probably have to go all the way back to when the Sabres were great in 06, 07. And beyond that, when you had Briere, Hesh, Pominville, or before that was Briere, Hesh, Dumont, though. So even that one changed. You had Roy Vanek and Finneganoff. That was a solid 2-year stretch. But man, we're talking about Cousins, Quinn, Peterka. Maybe that's a 5-year combination. Some teams elsewhere do that. I mean, Boston with Pastrnak, Marchand, and Bergeron. Some of the top lines can stay together for a really long time. We'll see if this line can do that. But you probably get jumbling at some point in time. So with Quinn going on that line, that means things are shaken up because Peterka was on the line with Tage Thompson and Alex Tuck leading into this game. And I was wondering if Granato was going to want to keep that together and find a new partner for Cousins and Quinn. I might have done that. I might have left Peterka with Tage and Tuck and put Benson with Cousins and Quinn. But I also understand why I get it. I get why he would want to put Quinn with familiar, faces in his first game back to kind of, massage him back into the lineup. So I get it. What that means, though, is that Jordan Greenway is going to the top of the lineup to play with Thompson and Tuck again. And I have not been a critic of Greenway all year long. I've liked his game. I've even campaigned that they should clone him or get a version of him to play in their bottom 6 next season. But emphasis on bottom 6. I do not like Greenway when he's playing on top lines. I do not like Greenway when he is out there late game situations trying to tie a hockey game. He is what he is. He's a 3rd, 4th liner that'll get you 10 to 15 goals, but he's not going to do much in terms of playmaking. He's not really a guy with a great shot even. I'm just not all that impressed. His motor even is not something that I want on a top 6 line to create energy. I think he's a big body. I think he uses it well. I think he's an amazing penalty killer. Great 2-way player. I don't have time for him in the top 6, and I really hope they get away from that going into next season and beyond. So Greenway back to the top line. That means a super tiny line. Krebs, Skinner, and Benson. Okay, Krebs with some offensive line mates again. Benson playing his off wing really shows faith in Benson that he's the guy that they decide, okay, you're good enough, you're mature enough, you're 2-way enough to play on the right side where angles are a little bit more difficult. Such a mature player, and they're trusting him to go over there. And then, of course, Girgensons, Robinson, and Olsen stays together on the bottom of the lineup. It also appears as though Cale Clegg may re-enter the lineup. So we'll see. Clegg might get in there. He's only played a couple of games this season on a 3rd pair with Jacob Bryson. All right. While we're on the lineups for this game, Ottawa, we'll talk more about the Senators in terms of the long term. The fact that I've got a great comparison from a listener that really ties this current Senators team and where they're at right now to where the Sabres were in the middle of this playoff drought. But for tonight's game specifically, Ottawa is going to have Shane Pinto, Drake Batherson, Brady Tkachuk as the top line. Stützle and Giroux will stay together. You got Ridley Gregg down in the bottom 6. And on the blue line, Jacob Chychrun kind of relegated to more of a 3rd pair role. Chychrun has had a little bit of a up and down tumultuous run here with the Ottawa Senators. I guess if you're really looking at his game when it comes to Ottawa this season, there was the trade rumor, right? He doesn't have a ton of points, 34 points on the season. Well, it's not too far off where he normally is. His minutes are a little bit lower as of late than they have been all season. And again, that's kind of because he's on kind of a 3rd pair, but he's not playing like 18 minutes. But he's gone down from a 24, 25 minute a night defenseman to in the last 5 games, he's only crossed the 23-minute mark once. And in the last 2 games, 1941 and 2001, although he did score 2 goals in his last game. But Chychrun, it sounds like he might want to trade again. So that's not I don't think going great. And that's a player I loved. I loved that idea for the Sabres. I wanted that for the Sabres. It's, a little bit of a sign that none of these ideas are perfect and they always carry some risk. But again, it's not like he's playing that bad. So Chychrun in the bottom of the roster. And then when it comes to goaltending in this matchup, let me see. Does Ottawa, at the beginning of the show here when I started, they did not have it up. Yes, they do now. Okay, Jonas Korpisalo will be the guy between the pipes. Luukkonen, of course, for the Sabres. All right, when we come back, is Ottawa the new Sabres? I'll explain. I think there's good reasoning behind this. That's when we come back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, which brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. Over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your parts guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Back on the Locked On Sabres podcast when you're done listening to us and if you're looking for some college hoops or some of the NFL owners meeting stuff this week, new rules, check out Locked On Sports today. Turn down the volume, all that shouting on Fox Sports and ESPN. Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. Free 24/7 streaming channel available on YouTube 24/7 or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Sabres and Senators, 7 o'clock on Wednesday. I always get up for these Senators games. Even when the Sabres are out of the playoff race, Ottawa will always hold a special place in my heart as a team that I love to hate, love to see suffer. And despite the fact the Sabres have suffered a lot with a 13-year playoff drought, Ottawa is about to be on a 7-year playoff drought. And I do think there is good reasoning. We had yesterday this comparison between the Sabres and the Senators. This article from Bruce Garriock of the Ottawa Sun that said, don't follow the Sabres blueprint when it comes to ways to fix the team and to fast forward the rebuild or whether to be too patient. There, again, wasn't even really anything in there that said anything of note. It was just, hey, don't be the Sabres. Okay, what about the Sabres? We never got that reasoning. One listener of ours did a better job than the Ottawa Sun did at breaking these two teams down. I'm going to read the whole thing. It's long, but it's really good from one listener. In referring back to the Ottawa article, I'd like to expand on the comparison for the Sabres and Ottawa's rebuild. In the video, talk about Ottawa taking swings, Buffalo being too patient. But early Buffalo drought years, pre-Eichel leaving, reminds me of the current Senators. Both had a core 3. Brady Tkachuk, Tim Stützle, Jake Sanderson. That's Ottawa right now. Eichel, Reinhart, Risto for the Sabres. Both acquired an average goaltender, Leonard for a first versus Korpisalo for a way too big overpaid contract. Both tried to bring in name talent, Kane, O'Reilly, Oposo, Montador versus Giroux, DeBrincat, Tarasenko, Chychrun. If you wrote that article, the Sens shouldn't rebuild like the Sabres, but included specifics of what should not be emulated, what would your number one reason be, and why is it the more prevalent? Would it be, and then there's a bunch of good options here, too many inexperienced GMs, too many inexperienced head coaches? Would it be a specific GM or a coach? Murray, bad drafting, Housley or Kruger in their coaching styles. Not finding a replacement for Ryan Miller sooner. Lack of hockey operations president with hockey insight to choose better GMs. Lack of drafting or development. Lack of depth. All of these are good options. I love this breakdown. I think it is so right. The Sabres 7 years into their playoff drought versus Ottawa 7 years into their playoff drought. The name comparison especially. Young cores that you want to flip the switch right away and win. So you trade away all your picks and prospects and you go get veteran established talent. both teams have done very similar things. And for neither, it's worked at all. And Ottawa is now staring that failure in the face. They are looking around and saying, well, DeBrincat's not even here anymore. Tarasenko's not here anymore. Chychrun might want out. Giroux is old, and he's coming up on the final year of his deal. So it's not really going well, building all these guys around our young studs. And what was beginning to happen around this time in that Eichel era? I mentioned this yesterday. You were starting to hear whispers from other places of what could the Sabres, or what could we give to get Jack Eichel out of Buffalo? That little idea was sprinkled around everywhere. That's happening with Brady Tkachuk right now. We've done it. I've wondered out loud what the Sabres would have to give up to get the Senators to trade him to a division foe. So Ottawa is a good comparison, I think, for the mid-drought Sabres of that Eichel era. The key for them will, of course, be don't get to a point where Tkachuk has no choice but to tell you, my career is half over. I can't give you the other half because you've given me no reason to believe that this is going to work. Ottawa, though, got some especially dumb stuff even on top of it. While the Sabres traded a lot of picks and prospects, here's a big difference. The Sabres had a lot in the cupboards already. They had 1 million prospects. They had a lot of picks. So they still had their first round picks when they drafted Rasmus Dahlin, for instance. They still had their draft pick when they selected Alex Nylander. They just swung and missed on Alex Nylander. They had the pick. They still had their first when they drafted Casey Middlestat or Dylan Cousins. Like, they had their picks. They traded their surplus to get those veteran players. Ottawa didn't have a surplus. Ottawa has picked through their own picks. They have not made a first-round pick in almost 3 years. June of 2021 is the last time that Ottawa made a first-round selection. And I got news for them. There's a chance, although I think a low one, they won't make a first-round pick this year. Although, again, I think that's probably going to be in the next 2 years. This is what's happened with Ottawa, in case you forgot. They have to forfeit a first-round pick for that Evgeny Dadonov nonsense from a couple years ago with the Golden Knights. If you need a refresher on that, the Senators had Evgeny Dadonov. They traded him to Vegas. Vegas then, after a year later, tried to trade Dadonov to Anaheim. The trade goes through. A couple of hours later, the player and the agent are getting involved, and now the Knights are in the NHL are involved, saying, well, hold up, this trade shouldn't happen because Anaheim's on Dadonov's 10-team no-trade list. And then Vegas goes, what 10-team no-trade list? What are you talking about? So what happened was Ottawa never informed Vegas that he even had a no-trade list, let alone they never gave them what was on it. And Anaheim was on it. So the trade got reverted. It threw the Golden Knights into flux because they had relied on that trade for cap stuff, and maybe they wanted the picks too. So Vegas is pissed now at Ottawa, and the league sides with Vegas, and they take a first-round pick away from Ottawa. Now, the good news for the Senators is they get a choice of when that first-round pick is, because if they had just taken away their 2024 first, it would be really tough because they're probably going to be picking in the top 5. So what Ottawa has is a decision after the lottery. They have 24 hours to decide, do we want to forfeit this year's first, push it off the next year? And then they get the same choice next year. If they push off this year's first, like I would expect, then they would lose their 2025 first-round pick unless that lottery goes well for them or they're picking high enough and they say, yeah, we're going to push this one off too. But then they would have to give it up in 2026. Either way, in the next 3 years, they're going to have to forfeit another first-round pick. They already haven't had a first-round pick in the last 2 drafts. In fact, last draft, they didn't have a first, second, or third-round pick. So we'll see if that prospect pool dries up. That was the one thing the Sabres had a little bit of along the way. It was just more so the players didn't develop, which was a bigger problem, I think, for the Sabres. Ottawa just doesn't even have the picks. That would be the one difference. But I think there's a lot of good similarities to tie in that this Ottawa team right now is where we all were 4 years ago, 5 years ago. That is where the Senators are at this very moment with a new owner coming through. Sabres and Senators tonight. When we come back, what about the fan relationship? I'll also have my parlay of the day, but the fan relationship, I'll tell you why I think these are big games coming up in this homestand. It has nothing to do with the playoff race. That's coming back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented by FanDuel. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Say goodbye to the busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. And man, do I need that because I lost my Final Four team, one of the four, and I got like no picks right in the first round that weren't chalk. It wasn't a good year for upsets. Whether you're into betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, you still have NC State. It's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. It's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can pick who's going to win it all with the future. Just visit fanduel.com/locked on and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Final segment here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Okay, why I think these are big games coming up. The Sabres have a 5-game homestand. And it includes a matchup, of course, here with the Senators. And then you've got a matchup on Friday with New Jersey. Toronto is in town on Saturday. Those games are always fun, even if they don't mean much. Washington twice. Only the first of which is in this 5-game homestand. So, I don't think they're going to catch Washington, but they'll have a head-to-head. If they win 3 in a row, maybe that game will be meaningful. That's the best I could do for you there. There has been a lot of talk, social media, and in the media, I've done it on the air, about the Sabres and their fans this season. It's kind of been this underlying story that has just kind of been right there under the surface all year long. But we get these little waves, these little peaks once in a while where we see something coming from below. So what we had most recently, which was an interview 2 weeks ago that Alex Tuck did on 32 Thoughts. Nothing crazy, nothing that, headliney from it, but Tuck did speak on the fact that this guys felt offended, a little offended to be exact here. He said a little offended at the booing and the chants. And the chants, of course, as I continue to point out, it is still unbelievable to me that this would have caused all this, is one single Fire Donnie chant against Columbus where they were losing 9-3 in December. One day, one chant. You heard that. There's been booing. Don't get me wrong. There's been a lot of booing all year long. And they said they don't like booing. Jeremy White on our morning show did an interesting exercise. The Sabres players being offended by booing. Do the Sabres players realize this happens everywhere else? Go Google these things one by one. Go search Bruins booed. 1 month ago, Bruins get booed and lost to Capitals. 1 month ago, the Bruins got booed. The Bruins. The Maple Leafs. November showered in boos and lifeless performance. The Panthers earlier in the season, boos from the fans. These are the best teams in the league that get booed. The only team that Jeremy couldn't find one for was the Golden Knights that haven't been booed. The Canucks in November, boos. Everyone gets booed. Everybody. Now, maybe it happens more often for the Sabres, but it's because they lose more often than most teams. So, yeah, the Sabres players need to mature a little bit here with this. Get over it. It's booing. And one chant. It's not worth being offended by. And if the players still are upset by that, that's not good. That's not going to create a positive environment for anybody. And again, I don't put any of that on the fans. The fans have every right times 10 to boo this team and to chant whatever the hell they want, because this is year 13 that nobody else has ever had to go through. So, little soft, if you ask me, if that indeed is how they still feel. And again, most indications are, yeah, they were put off by it, and that they still maybe carry that around a little bit. So why are these big games? They better perform. This is the last big homestand of the season. And I think this should be a non-story because, well, I don't actually 100% believe that, because it should be a story. These fans, again, what they've had to go through should get the benefit of the doubt on every little thing. And to me, guys like Kyle Okposo that were in that locker room and Zemgus Girgensons who have been here and know what the fans have gone through should be able to lead the rest of the group to a place of, guys, they've earned it. They've 100% earned it. We can't be upset by it. It's not fair to expect them not to boo or chant. So that they're the ones that, to me, are the ones to look at there. Dahlin, too. Dahlin's been here 6 years even. So I do think it is worth being a story because it's ridiculous that they would feel that way. It's offensive that they would feel that way. I think it's more offensive they would feel that way than that the fans would boo. They should understand it. They're not dumb. So that's how I feel about it. I don't think it matters, though, to the on-ice product. I don't think it matters to the on-ice performance. It's more of a gossip piece than anything. So you don't want it to be a story in the summer. You don't want it to be a talking point in the late spring here. You want it over. Well, the one thing that could fire it back up is if they really get hammered in these next 5 games. If they lose some bad ones, if they get smoked by Toronto, well, Toronto's different because the Leafs will fill up that building. You won't hear boos. But if they lose some bad games here to some bad teams, there's going to be booing. And maybe it becomes more of a story as we wrap the season up. Versus if they win, like they have been in their last 6, they're 5-1 at home in their last 6. And, oh, look at that. No booing. No getting on the players for poor performance. You won. Go win these 5 games. Go win 4 of them. And nobody in the world will be upset with you about your performance on home ice. That, to me, is why it's a big stretch. Because if they have a bad stretch, it just presents the somewhat possibility that this story gets stretched into the summer. And I don't think anybody wants that. That's the thing. That's the overall arching thing. You could debate how much you think it's meaningful or whether you want to care about this story. But I don't think anybody wants the story. And the story goes away if they finish strong here at home, in my personal opinion. All right, to wrap up our parlay of the day, we are going to hit on one of these. I know it. We're going to hit on one of these. Let's bet with the heart today. I've been trying to bet with the brain all year long, and it hasn't been working. So, all right, let's bet with the heart. Let's go Sabres on the money line to win this game outright. That's minus 144. The Sabres are favored in this game. The better goaltender. There's a big reason why for that. I'm going to go under 6.5 goals for tonight's game, minus 105. Get a little bit of a defensive performance from these two teams. And I'm going to go with the heart here and say that Jack Quinn will score. In his return to the ice, he is plus 310. Players can get that adrenaline boost when they're playing their first game after a long stretch. Usually guys are playing at their best before that little bit of they take a breath in the second game. Jack Quinn, when he returned from his Achilles injury in December, scored goals in 2 of his first 3 games. Not the first game, but 2 of his first 3. I think Quinn, with that shot that he's got, playing with Cousins and Peterka, which is the highest scoring line in the season for the Sabres, will find the back of the net. All that together, plus 1152, 10 to win 115, 100 to win 1152. That's our parlay of the day for tonight's game. That's going to do it for us. If you want to chime in with us, maybe give me your parlay idea. Let me know what you think. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSabres. You can become a texter today. That's going to do it for us. Enjoy Sabres and Senators, and hopefully we're talking to you after a Sabres win tomorrow here in the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.